I've heard Dan Brown say that writer's block doesn't exist.
There is no writer's block.
This encouraged me to see what science says that either supports or discredits this opinion. To my surprise, there was a lot of research that showcased innovative approaches to help access specific brain states that elicits creativity. Apparently, our brain favors certain types of work at different times of the day, in different locations, and with different lighting. I'm going to share what I learned and then combine all the takeaways into a perfect writing routine that should rid me of writer's block, but also hopefully help me with some story breakthroughs. Have you ever heard of the cathedral effect? Look at this cathedral. Apparently, there is something to the high ceilings that you can find in a cathedral that would have a different effect on your brain than if you were to work in an environment with a low ceiling. According to this research, abstract thoughts and creativity are generated as a result of working in spaces with high ceilings. But let's be honest, cathedrals are not the most conducive space to setting up your office. And luckily, accessing creativity isn't only limited to inside their walls. It has been said that even relatively small differences, such as a 2-foot discrepancy in ceiling height, have been shown to elicit such differences. So if you're lucky enough to have a loft, you can work in the low ceiling portion of it when you need to get the detailed work done. And then you can move over to the area with the higher ceiling when you need to access the state of mind that induces creativity. I know I don't have a loft, so I'll be experimenting in different locations at home to test out if the different ceiling heights in fact moves my brain to a state to favor a different type of work. So that's location. Now let's talk about timing. Apparently we change neurochemically throughout the day. Let me point you to a neuroscientist you've probably heard of, Andrew Huberman. He is not only one of the biggest podcasters, with some of his episodes averaging in the millions of listens or views, but he is also a professor at Stanford School of Medicine. He talks about dividing our 24-hour day into 3 different phases. Phase 1 is 0 to 8 hours after waking up. Phase 2 is 9 to 16 hours after waking up. And Phase 3 is 17 to 24 hours after waking up. Phase 2 seems like the sweet spot where magic happens. Let me explain as best as I can. So roughly 9 to 16 hours after waking, our serotonin levels are relatively elevated. And yes, I totally had to Google serotonin. As much as I'd like to pretend I knew how my serotonin levels were impacting my brain, I can't. This article from Healthline points to serotonin being a chemical that impacts every part of us, from our emotions, our body, and our motor skills. So by our serotonin levels being relatively elevated 9 to 16 hours after us waking, our mental and physical states, I'm guessing, are likely to be more relaxed and therefore optimal for brainstorming and creative work. But does this mean this is the only time that we can have creative breakthrough? Well, I looked into phase 1, which is 0 to 8 hours after waking up. We are apparently more alert during this time of the morning, and the chemicals elevated in our brain at this time lends itself to analytical work or work that is particularly challenging. Bear with me for a second. I get how phase 2 is more effective for brainstorming and coming up with new ideas, but phase 1 kind of seems to be perfect for dealing with problems in your story. So Andrew Huberman says in his podcast episode that the first 7, 8, or 9 hours of the day is where your neurochemistry is primed to get most of your challenging types of work done. So if precision and detail is what you're after, this could be the best time of day to, focus on that. I find that I'm able to fix story math rather effectively in the morning, and then as the day goes on, I tend to subconsciously reflect on what I worked on, perhaps coming up with creative solutions as the day continues, and then I reapply these to my writing as I enter phase 1 the next day. What I'm trying to say is that I do the thinking in phase 2, but the work in phase 1. I'll circle back to this as I sum up an ideal writing routine at the end. But before I do, here is how light affects our brain states in phase 2, which as a reminder is the ideal phase for brainstorming and creativity. So again, I'm referring to what Andrew Huberman mentioned, that 9 to about 16 hours after waking, we enter phase 2. And this is apparently a good time to start dimming the lighting. So dimming the light is perhaps an understatement.
You want to bring the level of lights down a bit. And when I say down, I literally mean down.
Andrew Huberman mentions that overhead lighting is actually not optimal for the neurochemical states that your brain wants to be in during that time. So when he uses the term brain state, what he is implying is that our brain state prefers detailed work in the morning, and then as the day goes on, our serotonin levels increase. And this, in essence, impacts our ability to be more creative. And so these increased serotonin levels combined with maybe no overhead lights, helps us in our creative endeavors, more so than if the lights were on above us. So he does also say that it's okay to have lights pointing directly at us. Apparently this doesn't affect our serotonin levels or our ability to think abstractly. So having dimmer lighting as we work in phase 2 seems to have an effect on how robust our brainstorming and creativity session will be. If you are writing longhand, as I often like to do when I'm brainstorming, this could be an ideal way to unlock creativity and hopefully beat any form of writer's block that you may have been facing. But what if you use a laptop or some sort of screen? Can the screen affect your creativity, especially as we're dimming the environment to help elicit this brain state?
People have different retinal sensitivities. What I mean by that is everybody differs in terms of how bright they can tolerate their visual environment and their screen.
So there's no conclusive report on the ideal lighting for screens, but I think we get the gist of it all. For an optimal creative environment, it helps to pursue creative endeavors 9 to 16 hours after waking, be in a room with a high ceiling, have dim lighting. Cool. But here's how I would bundle it up, and I'm not a neuroscientist. However, I have drawn from the science to come up with a pretty ideal writing routine that doesn't have to be long at all to help me address the tough space that I may be in creatively. Let me explain. If I'm in a pickle with either an area of my story or I'm all out of ideas, the main goal will be to create a space that seems approachable. I'm usually really down when I feel like my story has gone to and I find that I have very little motivation to do anything. So the last thing I feel like doing is committing a portion of time to face my story problems. So by creating a 10-minute window to approach the writer's block or a story problem, well, that doesn't seem that scary. I mean, you can do anything for 10 minutes. So I'll schedule a 10-minute session in the afternoon in a room that has somewhat of a high ceiling with natural light pouring through the windows and my overhead lights off. I'll then open my mind to brainstorming ideas and I'll write this down in a journal with no judgment. Now I have found that I can go for longer than 10 minutes, but the 10-minute mark is a gateway to more time if I need it. But it's also a nice round number to stop at should I feel like I've come up with 1 or 2 ideas that I like. What I'm trying to say is that there's no pressure. It's a baby step towards facing a problem that I would have otherwise ignored. I won't try to fix my work at this moment. I'll save the actual editing and the detailed work for the next morning as I approach phase 1. So whether it's science that makes tapping into this creativity possible, or whether it's just the fact that I sat down and did the work, I'm not too fazed, as long as there's some form of creative breakthrough. It's been enjoyable researching all of this though, and if it's been valuable to you, give this video a thumbs up. Thank you. And consider subscribing if you'd like to see more content from me in the future. I will leave links to the resources I used in my description, and I will also link a video for you in the end screen that I think you'll enjoy if you enjoyed this video. So, see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Bye.